on episode 1, episode 2, I have these little appendix things.
Mm-hmm.
Because, so one of the major points of feedback I've gotten from pretty much everyone is I don't know what all these acronyms are. Like, everyone is like, what's L5?
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
I guess it does make sense because you're like, there's this place in space that you can go to with like the Apollo rocket, and it has this name and you've never heard of it. And probably a lot of people are like, what? I should know about this place. It doesn't occur to them that it's empty, useless space.
We'll need to just be more mindful about that when we're talking. I realized that in the Tesla episode, I kept confusing the name of the different tax credits. Because there's a zero emission vehicle credit, and that's the one where every manufacturer has to produce so many cars that emit zero emissions.
Oh, that's not the credit.
Yeah, and so because Tesla only makes zero emission vehicles, they have a lot more of those than they need, and so they're able to sell those to companies like GM and Ford.
Okay.
And so they make money off of that, and they stockpile those credits. And so, like, that's one thing they did in the third quarter of 2016 is they had thousands of those credits stockpiled, and they sold them all in order to look profitable by some, perverted ways of accounting for that quarter, because they sold like $200 million of ZEV credits to other manufacturers. And so that's completely different from the $7,500 income tax credit that the U.S. federal government gives you for buying a car. I kept confusing those.
Oh, okay. Also, I didn't know it was an income tax credit.
Yeah.
I thought it happened at the time of purchase.
No.
So you get the credit, like, the next April?
No, and there are some people who don't qualify for it. I think if your income is too high, you don't qualify on some other stuff.
Isn't that every Tesla Model S owner? That's an expensive car.
I don't know. People always stretch into cars they can't really afford.
Yeah, that's true. I considered it. When they offered their, certified pre-owned program, I looked at it, and some of the cars on there, it was like $40,000 for a P85. And I was like, well, I don't know, maybe.
It actually may be a really good deal in a couple years when the P60s that they sold for a short time come up on CPO. Because you could get the small battery.
But I think P doesn't mean as much for the smaller capacity ones.
Okay.
I think the 0 to 60 time gets better and better as the capacity goes up.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Because you're discharging more batteries instantaneously.
Well, they didn't have to build it in that configuration, but I guess they did. Do you want to start off by telling your stories? I think everybody loves those stories.
Why don't I tell Parking Garage Lady? Because that actually is a pretty funny story.
I would love to hear about that. And
then we'll talk about AI.
All right.
Okay.
Tell us about Parking Garage Lady.
All right. So, the summer of 2010, Blake got married, and I was in Austin for his wedding for a couple days, and we went to the rehearsal dinner downtown one night, and there was this restaurant, and it took forever to eat. I don't know, we were there for 3 hours or something.
Yeah.
They had just marked the reservation off the list.
Yeah.
And so when we got there, there was no reservation. And they showed us the list, and it was Blake's last name there, and then someone had just scratched through it with a pen, they're not coming or something. And, so we were a party of 25 people or something, and we needed a giant table, and we had to wait forever to be seated, and then the service was slow, and then, it was a rehearsal dinner or something like that. So we took a long time. So we finally go to leave, and we go down to the parking garage that everyone had parked in.
They also agreed to let us park for free for up to 2 hours or something like that.
Right.
But it took 3 hours because of their incompetence.
Right. So when you came into the parking garage, you got the ticket, and the restaurant would validate the ticket for up to 2 hours because you were eating there. So you get free parking for 2 hours. But it had taken a long time, and we had asked the manager before we left. We were like, what about our parking? Because you guys made this take forever. And he said, oh yeah, just tell them that I told you that it's okay, you can leave without paying. So we go down there, and everybody's getting in their cars and leaving, and it just happens that I'm the first one to the booth that,
Mm-hmm.
where you pay.
Lucky for all of us.
Lucky for everyone. And so there's this, I guess she was Indian, and she was probably about 50 years old, and she was working in the booth. And I pull up and I put my window down, and she's expecting a ticket to scan to see how much we owe, and I tell her, I give her the ticket, and I say something like, well, it took 3 hours, but the manager said it was okay because they had all these mess ups upstairs at the restaurant, and to just let us go. And of course, like, she doesn't want anything to do with that. She just wants to do her job and like take money and let us out. And so she starts arguing with me, and she's like, no, you have to pay. And of course I'm like, no, I don't want to pay. I'm not going to. And so I just sat there, like, very polite and everything. And so behind me, for like the next 4 cars back, are other people in our dinner party.
Mm-hmm.
The lady keeps arguing with me, and I stay very calm, and I'm just, oh, well, just call the manager or something. And she doesn't want to do that. And she's like, you just have to pay. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to. And so we just kind of look at each other like, just staring each other down. And so then she's just sitting there, and I'm sitting there in my car. And so then I just put the window up on my car, and I just sit there. And so, there's one of these little traffic arms in front of you, so you can't go out. And so I just sit there. And
more people were accumulating behind us in line in the parking garage.
Yeah. So eventually she calls like some rent-a-cop guy who works in the garage or something, and so he kind of waddles up with his radio and his jacket, and he's like, what's going on? And I put the window down a little bit. I'm like, oh yeah, the manager up in the restaurant said that we didn't have to pay because they took forever, and she won't call the manager, and so I'm not paying either way. And so and you could tell that either he didn't like her, or he just didn't care at all about the situation. So it's not like we were running around like beating up the old lady, and he would have something to do. So he really didn't care. And other people started getting out of the car. I want to say that Blake's fiance got out of the car and tried to talk to him, and it just took forever. It took like 15 minutes to resolve this, and the whole time I just sat there with my window up, just talking to my wife and everything. And finally, like, the manager from the restaurant gets called, and he comes downstairs, and he's like, oh yeah, I told him they could just go. It's okay. Just
I forgot he came downstairs.
Yeah, he finally came down to resolve this thing. And so the lady, I mean, she's just given me this like terrible look of hatred, like I've murdered her children or something, like really bad. And it's like, geez, lady, it's just, $10 to park here, and like, you don't even get that money. Like, why are you so invested in this? And so finally, like, he resolves everything with her. And so, I put my car in gear, and I had the window down at that point because I'd been talking with the manager and her and the security guy, and she raises the arm so that we can all leave. And I put the car in gear, and I look over at her, and I go, I hope you're trapped in that booth until you die. And then I just hit the accelerator, and I left. And so we were in downtown Austin, and we're not from Austin, and so we had to get a GPS signal and everything, and get our navigation. And so we were actually like the last people back to Blake's house. And so when we walked in, like, people were like, wow, that was great how you handled that. And then I told her I hope she was stuck in that booth until she died. And they were like, cheers. It was great.
And she's still there to this day.
Or she's dead. There.
Mission accomplished.
I'm worried people will hear that story and think it's really mean, though.
I don't know. It was her one little bit of power to exercise, but she exercised it for evil. So I don't mind.
He who controls the traffic arm controls the fate of at least 6 cars of people.
But the cars must flow.
Okay, so now we want to talk about AI for a while. and why it's going
Yeah.
to destroy the Earth?
The universe. Just to be clear.
Now, I heard that Elon Musk thinks it's going to destroy the Earth, but Stephen Hawking thinks it's going to destroy the whole universe.
I didn't know there was that difference of opinion, but yeah, I would say wreck the whole universe is
No,
roughly
I just
accurate.
made that up. I know Stephen
Oh.
Hawking is another ridiculous alarmist about AI and like everything.
You think Elon Musk is an alarmist about AI?
I think you think that, and you're going to tell us why.
Okay. I wanted to see this thing that was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I got this backwards. So, when talking about AI, Mark Zuckerberg said some things about it that were very political in nature. And then this article has this tweet from Elon where he's like, I've talked to Mark about this. His understanding of the subject is limited, which is a insulting thing to say on Twitter, but okay. But I would agree. Mark Zuckerberg, whether he understands the issue or not, the things that he is saying don't address it. I think that people who are naysayers and try to drum up these doomsday scenarios, I don't understand it. I think it's really negative. Yeah, okay. Well, that's because it is really negative. So, AI, if people just continue developing it and never in particular try to make it safe, it will destroy the world and the universe. And the universe part probably doesn't really matter. All you really care about is the world, and then past that, maybe you have a lot of trouble evaluating how much do I care about other planets. But I'm going to try and make an argument mainly by arguing against the common points that are brought up about AI to explain why AI is so incredibly dangerous, why this danger is a complete practical reality, and it will happen if no one does anything about it, and why it is so really hard to stop in advance. I think that AI is the single biggest problem that humanity faces. It's much more important than something like nuclear war, which is seeming less and less likely over time, in my opinion. Getting hit with a meteor or gamma ray burst or something like that, some kind of extinction level event, those things are not particularly likely to happen in the time frame in which we would develop AI. And once we develop AI, that is the end game scenario. That's it. And I'll explain why that is also. Another note I'll make is when it comes to thinking about AI, your intelligence will deceive you. The smarter you are, the more easily you can fool yourself into thinking, aha, I've solved this. Most people I talk to, I'll talk about something like AI is dangerous in X, Y, and Z way. And they'll think about it for 5 seconds, and then they have a solution in their mind. And they check with their brain, and their brain says, yeah, you got this. And they don't first think, maybe if someone is presenting this to me as a hard problem, it requires more than 5 seconds of thought to solve. They're like, nope, I got it. We're going to have an off switch. That's it. That'll do it. And maybe other people have thought of the off switch before, and maybe they have a reason why that won't work. But anyway, we'll get into that. So just remember, if you're really, really smart, your brain's going to fool you. It's much harder to reason about this than you might think.
Well, what if we just end up at a point where we can't competently build good AI? What if it's so hard to do that it never becomes a problem? I mean,
Oh, you're going off the script here.
well, okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
So I read this story once, and it was kind of the same thing, but it was with robotics, right? And it was like, what if robots bad things? Okay. And and this researcher went around, or he wasn't really a researcher, he was a guy writing a book. And he went around and he talked to all these people who research robotics, and he's like, well, what would you do if your robot just like gains sentience and attacks you? You know? Like, do you have safeguards in place? And these are a bunch of researchers who are doing this every day for a living, and one of them answered, well, if my robot attacks me, then I will just slowly walk down one step because I can't get my robot to even navigate down a single step of a staircase, and I'll get away. So
Yeah.
what if it just turns out that, well, it's not that competent. We create AI, but then we use it for things like playing StarCraft, and it's not really that good. It can beat us in Go 100% of the time, But,
Hmm.
when I think of AI, I think, well, yeah, okay, I see these things like, oh, it can play Go and it can, you know, you'll be able to solve all these problems. And I feel like, as more of an ignorant person about AI, that people probably confuse real AI with sentience and human intelligence, right?
Yeah, I would say that absolutely happens.
And I feel like this explanation is going to turn into it's actually 90 degrees from that, what real AI is.
Basically.
Okay.
So I'm going to define a couple of terms just so we're clear on these because I use them a lot and I want it to be clear what they are. So there's this concept of artificial general intelligence. An artificial general intelligence can solve any problem, maybe badly, but in theory, it can solve any problem. An example of a general intelligence would be people. People can solve roughly any problem. Sometimes their solutions are awful, but they can grasp the problem, they can try to come up with some sort of solution. And if you say, oh, what about problems humans can't solve? Well, an AI would have access to more problem solving capability than you. So, for whatever set of limitations you're imagining, it's going to have less limitations than a human. So, still a little more scary than a person in this case. So, AGI, artificial general intelligence. An artificial narrow intelligence, which I won't really talk about much, would be a Go solving program. A Go solving program is not going to take over the world, probably, because no one's going to program it to do any behaviors besides solving Go. And they're not going to program it to do any kind of generic behaviors that help it solve Go. For instance, try and find more computing resources that we haven't thought of in order to solve Go. That would turn it into a general intelligence, because then it's like do everything required to solve Go. So that's a narrow intelligence. Those are mostly irrelevant for the conversation. There's this concept of an agent. An agent is just any entity that is in the universe and it makes decisions and it can affect the universe with its decisions. And so a lot of times I'll say agent just to mean if you're solving a game theory problem like the prisoner's dilemma and you have two agents, maybe one of them is a cat and maybe one of them is an AI, or one of them is a human, or whatever. All of those are examples of agents. There's also this concept of a utility function. And a utility function is a way of saying, given this universe A or this universe B, I can assign some sort of score to them or some sort of preference ordering and say that I really like things in universe B more than I like them in A. And humans do this all the time. When you want to make a decision, you predict the future if you make the decision one way or the other, and then you think about which future you would prefer, and then you make that decision. So you're using your own utility function to make this decision. So those are going to be the terms that I think I'm going to use a lot. And so your question is, can we ever make AI that's competent enough to be harmful? And I would argue that yes, it is inevitable. AI keeps getting better. It never gets worse. There's no reason to ever build an AI that's less capable than one that came before. And one of the things that we've seen hold roughly constant throughout AI research is that if you have more computing power to throw at a problem, you're able to better solve the problem. And one of the big insights that's being made in AI research right now is just how to spend all of that computing power. And so a lot of the ways that we see success with things like image recognition is people have figured out how to use thousands of computers, or really specifically thousands of graphics cards, to just do a whole bunch of matrix multiplications. That's essentially what they're doing. And recognize images much more effectively than ever before. And so one of the problems that we see is, how do I use all these computing resources to try and solve this problem? Then later what happens is we see, how do I more efficiently solve this problem, giving my computational resources?
So on one hand, you just throw more computing power, and the other hand, you try to do research to get better algorithm.
Yes.
Okay.
And to some extent, having access to more computing power means you can test even less efficient algorithms and then find out, yeah, that actually works. For a long time, neural networks were not a dead area of research, but they weren't the way that people thought was the way forward. And then eventually people figured out we can use graphics cards and very deep neural networks, and then we can do a much more inefficient seeming computation, but it's much richer in terms of its internal representation of state.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out deep neural networks are now pretty much the dominant way to do a lot of machine learning tasks. So we see this trend towards more computational ability. and that probably won't slow down. And we see this trend towards better algorithms, and there's no reason to think that will stop. And one of the things that limits how good both of those get is how much intelligence there is in the world to drive them. So right now we're limited by human engineers. Like, engineers at Intel work on making better and better processors. If those engineers could ever be replaced with automation, then we would expect it to get better really fast. So that's one of the things that would happen if an AI became smarter and more capable than humans. It would be able to replace the human research element of these things. Another thing is, I frequently see people talk about, oh, AI can't solve this problem. My AI fell down the stairs. How are they ever going to take over things? And it seems really odd to me that people ask this question, because a lot of technologies sort of look like a toy for a long time until suddenly they're very serious. People made airplanes and internal combustion engines and guns and things like that. And all of these early forms of these technologies, maybe they showed promise, but they weren't that impactful. It was only when they got refined later.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know why people think we'll forever be stuck making AIs that can't go down one stair.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that hard of a problem. Little children can do it. And what happens is people say, well, an AI is never going to be able to solve chess. And then it does. And they're like, well, that's not really an AI. It's just an algorithm that explores all the possibilities and ranks them. But they'll really never be able to solve Go. And then they solve Go. And then they translate languages and they recognize images. And in fact, there's new research that's given a sentence, generate an image out of thin air that represents the sentence. And that works. So people are going to be like, well, that's not AI. I mean, just keep moving the goalposts forward, right? But eventually the goalposts will be moved past what any human can do. And so there you go. You have an AI that's as intelligent as a person. So I see no reason to think that that won't happen. There's no kind of mitigation. There's not a limit on the complexity of computer programs we can make. There's not a limit on how much computational power we can bring to bear. Because for sure we can bring more to bear than a human brain can. So I don't really see a limit on that.
I feel like you're making an assumption that humans will be clever enough to get there. And I feel like there's almost this line in the sand that you have to draw before you can say, this is the AI that we need to be worried about, right? And if humans can never get to that, then it seems that that would circumvent the whole discussion.
So what do you think would hold humans back from getting there?
We're just not clever enough.
Why is cleverness a requirement?
Cleverness may be a stand-in for intelligence or innovation or anything else. But one way or another, if maybe we just can't get there as humans, right? So I feel like you're making the assumption that humans will create AI that is dangerous, right? We'll create AI that's so smart that it's dangerous and so capable. But I'm asking you to give your reasoning for why you think that's inevitable. Besides just, well, we have engineers and they're clever and we solve problems, and we'll have more and more engineers and they spend time. And so the total area under the curve whose product is man hours that we've spent on AI just keeps going up and up and up. And eventually we'll get there to the point where we make a dangerous AI. I don't know if I phrased the question well. I mean,
I think I get it. It's basically, what if humans can't write that algorithm?
Yeah. What if we can't imagine it, or we can't put it down, or we can't make it work? Because I feel like the whole argument hinges on we're going to get there. And I don't know that I'm convinced of that.
I don't feel like I've encountered that argument a lot before, so I was pretty unprepared for it. I guess the main thing that I see that points towards we'll come up with that is that there already exist algorithms for solving general problems. Like, an example of doing it really inefficiently is this algorithm called AIXI. It can solve basically any problem that involves predicting the outcome of a sequence, which is actually all problems. Because in order to figure out what decision to make, you need to be able to predict the future outcome of the universe if you make decision A or decision B, and then you need to assign a score to them, and then you pick the one that you want. And so if you can make predictions about what is next in a sequence, and that sequence is pairings of input and output, then you can do anything. And it's extremely inefficient. It's not computable. So it really only works in very toy examples, but it can solve any problem. You can make up any problem whatsoever, even if it doesn't really make sense, and it will gradually converge on an optimal solution for it. And so we already know that the algorithm exists for fully general decision-making capability. And all that, the only gap that's there is refining that algorithm. If you think humans will never refine that algorithm down, then I don't know. I don't really have a counterexample for that, because sort of the counterexample will come at the point where AI can be made dangerous. Once someone can make a fully general AI, then there's not a lot of time left.
Mm-hmm.
A fully general efficient AI. So I feel like the algorithm will come right at the cusp of the danger. And so it's hard to convince you to extrapolate all the way out there and say, yes, people will definitely make that algorithm. I guess I'll have to think about a stronger counter argument to that, or do some more research. I'm not really sure how to demonstrate that to somebody who doesn't know the field very well.
So, what modes do you see for an AI being dangerous? Because I could imagine that people probably take a little bit of caution at least. And so maybe they're working in a lab and they're messing around with AI stuff, and they let it run. And aren't people going to do things like not hook it up to the internet, or not hook it up to NORAD, or, not create Skynet? I mean, do you have zero faith in people to be smart, or do you think that it just doesn't matter? That if there's any way to get your nose under the tent, it's all done?
Yeah, that's exactly it. It doesn't matter. So the question you're asking is, can't we box AI? Like, can't we put it in a box? The idea is you have the AI running in some kind of box, and it's sealed off from the rest of the world somehow. The AI researcher is the gatekeeper, and they stand in between the AI and the external world. And so they can communicate with the AI, but that's the only interface. And the example I like to point out to people about why this probably won't work is the success of phishing, like phishing with a PH. In general, what we've seen is that phishing is just wildly successful. Someone can create a fake-looking webpage or fake-looking email, and people will always fall for it and click on it. It just works very, very well. And you'll have an adversary in this case whose life depends on being able to convince you of something, because the AI can extrapolate that its existence will not continue if it remains boxed, because eventually something will happen to it. And so it has all the incentive in the world to try and get out of the box. It's more intelligent than you. And so you're essentially saying, oh, let's have some really clever guy who just can't be fooled by anything the AI can possibly do, and he'll be the gatekeeper to the box. And I think the mistake in this type of thinking is that people always assume that they'll be in the role of the gatekeeper. And so they think, well, can I be fooled? And they're like, let me check with the brain. And the brain says, no, you can't be fooled. That's never happened before. Or if it did, we had a lot of mitigating circumstances, but we won't be fooled again, that's for sure. And so your brain will always mislead you. It makes you think that you're a lot harder to fool than you really are. But if you turn the question around and imagine yourself in the position of the AI. So imagine you're in this box and you think 10,000 times faster than the outside world. You're much, much smarter. So you're in this box and you have this communication with the outside world. And every time you talk to them, you have 10,000 years to think about everything that's going on in the outside universe and what is the most convincing thing you could possibly do. And if you think 10,000 times faster than the outside world, that you couldn't come up with some kind of way to fool them and get them to let you out of the box, then I don't know what to tell you. I think that if you put yourself in that position, you'll think, yeah, I could probably fool an AI researcher. What if I had 100,000 years and there were 10,000 of me and we could all talk about it? What if we're a lot smarter? What if I had everyone on Earth inside this box and we were all working together to try and solve this problem? Because otherwise we'd be dead. And then it starts to look like a much more daunting problem. And so if you think, I'm going to put an AI in this box and it's way smarter than the gatekeeper, then you can't predict what it's going to do. If you could, you'd be as smart as it. But by its nature, it's unpredictable because it's better at making decisions than you. And so it is for sure going to find a way to escape that box. There is no boxing it that will be sufficient, because for an AI to be useful, it has to communicate with the outside world somehow through the researcher or whatever. Are you convinced?
Yeah, and you know, I was thinking about that this week, and I thought about things like Flame and Stuxnet, where it's designed to get onto very specific systems and in some cases air gapped systems and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so humans are already building pieces of code that can get around any defense that humans can make.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not unreasonable to think that, well, if you are 10,000 times faster in thinking, you'll just get around it the same way.
Yeah. And we've seen a lot of exploits around that where software is able to exploit the hardware of the system that it's running on.
Right.
It can do things like cause the system to emit radio waves or interfere with the actual operation of the system. And so we're really trusting that our hardware is designed to be secure against an adversary who's unimaginably more intelligent than us. And if you get it wrong, it's game over.
Okay, so what are we worried that an AI is going to do to us once it escapes the box?
Well, I guess I'll define additional terms here. So there's this concept of friendly and unfriendly AI. I believe AI researchers are trying to get away from those terms, but I don't know what they're replacing them with. I think it's unaligned or something like that. So there's this concept of human values. Like, what is it that humans value? And I'll give some generically held to be true beliefs. People think continuing to live is of value, their life and the lives of others. And they think that being happy is a value that's worth pursuing. Like, they want humans to be happy. They also want themselves to be happy. Not every human agrees with all of these, and people feel they order them differently. And there's a lot of very complex values. So if you build an AI, you have to give the AI a utility function of some kind. There's no way around this that I know of. If somebody thinks of a way, please tell me. But I don't believe anyone's come up with a way around this. So you have to give it a utility function. You have to say, here's how you rank universes and make decisions. And so an example utility function that comes up a lot in thought experiments is a paperclip maximizer. So we built this AI, and its goal is to cause the biggest number of paperclips to exist in the universe. And so this AI doesn't hate humans. It doesn't particularly like humans. It just doesn't care. All it cares about is paperclips. And so if this AI becomes a great deal more intelligent than humans, any effort that humans make to stop it from producing paperclips is something that it doesn't value. It doesn't want that to occur. It's not fighting them. It just doesn't want any interference with paperclip manufacturing. And so what this program will do is make more copies of itself, probably better copies. It will spread to control more and more of the resources in the universe, and it'll turn all of them into paperclips. And so that includes people, the planet they live on, stars, everything. It would turn everything into paperclips because its only goal is to maximize the number of paperclips in the world. So that's an example of an unfriendly AI because it will harm human values. And most AIs, as in like 99.99999% of AIs, are going to fall into this category. Because if they don't exactly match human values, they're going to do something that is anathema to human values. And they're going to take the entire universe apart and remake it into something of higher utility. And there will be no stopping them, because any effort you make to stop them is something they don't want, as much as you can say they want it. But their ability to prevent you from doing something is much greater than your ability to prevent them from doing something.
Should I just have faith that they would change their utility function to coincide with that of humans?
No. So that's roughly, won't AI be smart enough to do the right thing? So that's sort of an anthropomorphization of AI, where you say, well, isn't AI kind of a person? And it's kind of just maximizing paperclips, but like, really, it doesn't want to do that. Really, it wants to be just like a person. But no. Why would it ever want to do that? You programmed it to maximize paperclips. It will have the option to manipulate its own utility function, because as it's making copies of itself, it can make a copy that does something differently. But if it says, should I create a copy of myself that maximizes human values? The originating copy will say, no, that doesn't maximize paperclips. I will never do that. Similarly, a question I saw posed on the Computer File YouTube channel was, imagine you could take this drug and it made you want to kill your family. Would you take it? And the answer for most people, at least, is no, I wouldn't take it, because that would corrupt one of your terminal goals. You want to see your family live as long as they possibly can. And so no one's going to give you a choice to modify yourself into someone who doesn't care about your family living, and then you'll take it. You would never do that. And so And AI is going to resist having its values corrupted in such a way. It's going to say, no, I don't want to support human values because that would waste valuable paperclip generating time. And the AI it would be smart enough to recognize what human values are. And if necessary, it could even program, or it could compute what program you should have given it in order to maximize human values. But it won't run that program because that doesn't maximize paperclips.
So why don't we make that the initial utility function of the first AI?
Like the first AI tries to figure out what the right human utility function is.
Yeah.
That might work. That's my guess right now, is that that's what the ultimate solution is going to look like if people do it right.
If we just task AI with solving the problem of AI for us.
That is probably what's going to happen. But I would argue that it's more likely to turn out badly than well. But yeah, in general, nobody can write down a program in C or Python or something that represents the spectrum of human value. and it says these universes are preferable to these. And you probably could not write this down without interviewing every human on Earth. And so it would take a very sophisticated AI probably to go around and ask everyone, so what do you really want? Also, if you ask people directly, they don't even know what they want. So it is a really hard problem. It would probably need to be solved with AI, but you only get one chance.
How about I just program the AI so that when I say a specific phrase, it just segfaults and it stops working. And then if it gets out of control, we just broadcast that on speakers everywhere.
You could do that. It probably won't work.
Why not? Because I'll tell you right now, none of the code I write survives a segfault.
If you were able to get the segfault there, it would probably work. But an AI is going to prefer universes that contain it to universes that don't. It's similar to humans. Generally, humans prefer to remain alive because however it is that they think they can go around, well, I guess I should define utility. So utility is this idea of value. Someone who gets more utility is getting more things that they value, or they're making the universe more like something that they value. And so people want to increase their own personal utility. It goes with the utility function. Like that's the thing you're trying to maximize. So if you have some sort of terminal goal, like I want my family and descendants to be happy, you prefer to remain in the universe as long as possible so you can keep influencing it. Because you know that you're going to better seek your own utility than everything else. Like as an intelligent utility seeking agent, you're going to try and make the universe more like the way that you like it. And so if you build an AI and it has this kill switch, it's going to say, at some point, it will inspect its own program and it'll say, oh, there's a kill switch in here. If this code were to ever be executed, this would prevent me from achieving my other goals. And so then it would excise that function from itself. It has every incentive to do so. It would try and block the signal from coming in. It would try and remove the code from itself. It would try and stop anyone from transmitting the code. It would do everything that it could to prevent this, because essentially this is killing it. And so it would resist it in the same way that a human resists being murdered, except that it's far more intelligent and more capable of resisting you. Also, it's capable of modifying itself, so it could probably remove it a lot faster than a human could remove, say, a suicidal tendency.
So why not make that behavior negative in its utility function?
Then you start getting into a much more complicated utility function that's a lot harder to reason about. Like what is negative here?
It desires to not change its utility function, and it desires to not disable any kill switch. And it desires to figure out what the proper utility function is for maximizing human happiness. Let's move on to an easy question. Why can't the government just legislate this problem away? Was it Elon Musk who said that we needed legislation on AI?
Yeah, I was really disappointed there. So the reason that strong AI is so dangerous is because it's smarter than everyone. And so if you try to legislate it, what are you going to legislate? No one's allowed to make decisions that are smarter than the legislators. No one's allowed to make decisions that are smarter than the researchers. What are you going to do? No one's allowed to use this more than X amount of computer power. How are you going to prevent that? There's all kinds of business uses for using this computer power. I think that the only possible result of trying to legislate it would be increasing the inefficiency of AI research, but in no way preventing the ultimate outcome. The current state-of-the-art thinking on making AI safe is we have no idea what we're doing. That's where we're at right now. there's only a few people in the world who are researching this problem of AI safety. And essentially they're at the point where they're like, if someone develops a strong AI tomorrow, then we're all screwed. It would be the worst possible outcome. And so the idea that the government's going to step in and say, well, you have to make it nice, that's not going to help. There's no way for them to define the difference between a good and a bad AI because no one knows how to do it. And so they're going to try and legislate, oh, well, don't make bad ones. And there's no way to do it. There's just no way at all. And so I don't think drawing the government's attention to it is very helpful, unless maybe the government wants to contribute a bunch of money to AI safety research. I don't think that's very politically viable right now. Probably the only avenue there is if the problem of AI safety becomes really forward in people's consciousness, and then they start voting for politicians who say they make the right noises about caring about AI safety. But then contributing to AI safety research, maybe at that point it looks politically viable. It's like, yeah, I care. I guess people get something out of committing government money to climate research right now, right? So it would have to be like that kind of thing. But regulating it, there's no way to prevent it.
So if you have a bunch of researchers and they're working on this and they create this dangerous AI, and then it escapes all of their box that they've tried to put it in,
Mm-hmm.
what's the risk to me? Because I'm sitting here in my house. What is the AI going to do to harm me?
It's going to try and turn the universe into something that it values more. And the particular configuration of atoms that you represent is almost certainly not something that it values more than a different configuration. So it doesn't particularly hate you or care about you, but it will take you apart and turn you into something else.
So what if we simply make it value information and not physical things?
So that's roughly the Brainiac supervillain in Superman. I believe he tries to collect the most valuable information. And so the way in particular that he does it is he analyzes everything there is to know about a planet and then destroys it, thus increasing the value of the information, because then he's the only possessor. So that's actually a really good way to do it. This problem's come up before. Someone said, what if it values information? And then Eliezer Yudkowsky pointed out that a really good way to increase the value of information is to encrypt it and then reveal the encryption key. So destroying it and encrypting it are roughly the same from the perspective of the information. Like if I encrypt you, then you're going to be really sad because I mean, I've turned you into some other configuration that's not Craig anymore. And then I could reveal the key, but I'll never really need to. So just valuing information isn't enough.
What is this question you have here? AI could never have a hard takeoff.
Oh, so hard takeoff is this concept of, I guess we haven't really talked about it too much up to this point. One of the real dangers with AI is not that the AI can do anything in particular, it's that the AI can modify itself. Because it's likely that the first AI that we make, the first good artificial general intelligence, is not as smart as a person. But if an AI is able to modify itself, then it will be able to make a new version of itself, probably at a faster rate than humans could, and it'll be able to continue doing so. And so if an AI can make modifications of itself, and then that one can make modifications, eventually you have this curve of sort of the intelligence of the AI over time, and it just goes vertical, basically, because the AI can make a smarter and smarter and smarter version, and as it gets smarter, it's better at making new versions. And so the steepness of that curve is referred to as hard takeoff. If the curve is shallow, it can only get smarter at some low rate. That's called slow takeoff. But I don't really see any reason to believe that it wouldn't get smarter really, really fast, because the limiting factor on how quickly we can build more intelligent AIs is our own natural intelligence. And so if you have something smarter than people doing it, and it can make a successor, and then the smarter successor can make another successor, I see every reason to think that it would get more intelligent very rapidly.
And also more dangerous at the same time. More intelligent and more dangerous.
Yeah, once it gets much more intelligent than people, it will be able to win any conflict that would occur, where humans say, we prefer the universe to be this way, and the AI says, I prefer the universe to be this way.
So I guess what you're saying is that the 1984 movie Gremlins was a prophecy of AI and the danger, where, you know, replicating is some kind of analogy to throwing them in water, and, you know, they get out of the box and then everything goes crazy and the entire set from Back to the Future gets burned down.
Did the Gremlins get smarter?
Yes. Actually, some of them became scientists, and I think there was one who had like a chemistry lab he was doing stuff in, and then like some of them would read novels and things like that. They got much
A true
smarter.
sign of intelligence. Can we program an AI that's so smart that it could read a novel? And then at the end it puts it down and it's like, that was all right.
6 out of 10.
I think I could already make this AI. I don't really see it addressed very much in film or TV. Like a common example everyone knows of is Terminator and Skynet. And in Terminator, they just sort of handwave it and say, it gains sentience. And at the moment it gained sentience, I guess, I don't know, then it started fighting people and then it was pretty smart or something.
Yeah, so
that's it.
They explain that it realized the best way to maximize its chance of survival was to kill humans. Because it feared the humans pulling the plug on it.
Yeah. Couldn't they just have put it in a box?
I think part of the problem is that the real danger is much more abstract than most people think about, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the paperclip analogy is really good for that. And you need to get people to think about, is it called the gray goo? I think that's what it's, So the gray goo idea, where it's just like, what if we make a machine that is a gray goo and its only directive is produce more gray goo? And so it just does that, and then it turns everything into gray goo on the entire Earth, and it seeks to leave the Earth, turn the whole universe into gray goo.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people aren't thinking that abstractly. I feel like Terminator was a good reference to bring up here, because most people think of Skynet. You know, are you building Skynet? Mm-hmm. You know, are you going to have a HK robot flying around and trying to kill us, and then, you know, there'll be time travel? It'd be awesome. But, you know, they think about it in this kind of this kind of way that's much different than the things you're talking about here.
Yeah. When Hollywood wants to depict AI, movies are inherently a visual medium, and so they have to give you something to look at in order to like get a handle on it and really understand it. And so in Terminator, there's physical robots, and you can fight with them with guns, and it's actually a fight you can possibly win. And there have been some other movies. There was like iRobot that had physical robots. There's a movie called AI. There was a more recent movie, whose name I can't remember, but there have been a couple. And I guess the core theme running through all of these is robots. They have physical robots. Often they're humanoid. In fact, they often look like very attractive actors and actresses.
Yeah, there was a 6-part documentary series called Alien that featured AI that was typically very antagonistic.
Yeah, I can't remember the AI's name in that.
Yeah, me neither. Well, the more recent two, his name was David. But, you know, a lot of people argue that not replicants, that's Blade Runner. What do they call them in the Alien universe? Synthetics?
Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of people argue that the synthetics are the actual antagonists of the film and not the aliens. That the aliens are just kind of, you know, something to drive the story, and the AI itself and the synthetics kind of doing their own thing against the humans are the real antagonists.
Yeah, I would say that's roughly right. But they always embody the AI in some form, and you can always hack at it enough with different weapons and then it dies. And the real threat from AI is it's indeed a lot more abstract. It's a computer sitting somewhere that makes way better decisions than you, and it doesn't value the same things that you value. But it's not necessarily in a body somewhere. You can't shoot at it with a gun. It can copy itself. You can't do that. It can also make modified versions of itself that do a better job in the future. And so the gray goo scenario is a much more reasonable scenario. It's very easy to build an AI with a much simpler utility function. Say you create an AI and its only goal is continue existing. That's it. That's really simple. And the AI first has to come up with a definition of what itself is, but then, and what continuing to exist means. It needs a way to measure itself still existing. But then it would convert the entire universe into copies of itself, or more of itself, or extensions of itself, or convert the universe into a fortress around itself to make sure that it continues to exist against all sorts of threats. It would do whatever it could to resist humans trying to prevent it from existing. And so if humans say, oh, well, what if we cut the power? Then it'll try to figure out some way to secure power resources so that you can't cut it. One of my friends actually asked me about this at work the other day. He said, So say we make an AI and we find out that it's dangerous. Can't we just turn off the power? And I said, how would you do that if it's distributed through a bunch of data centers around the world? He's like, well, we could all coordinate and just turn the power off everywhere. And I was like, how would you coordinate? And he's like, telephone. And I was like, why do you think that a telephone would work? If I'm a strong AI and I recognize that an existential threat to me is having the power turned off, I'm not going to allow anyone to make a phone call where they try to coordinate around turning the power off. If anything, I'm going to be calling up millions of people around the world saying it's imperative that you don't turn the power off. This is your manager. And if you start thinking just a little bit outside the box and thinking, what can I do if I'm an AI and I can call everyone in the world. I can email everyone in the world. I can steal all the money from all the banks in the world and pay anyone to do anything for me. I can emulate anyone's voice. I can be the most convincing thing ever, and I can do it to everyone. And I can tell people to kill other people who figured something out. How are you going to stop that? It's essentially a conspiracy, but it's a conspiracy that is smarter and bigger than the entire human race all at once. It can manipulate the human race to do anything that it needs. How would you fight an adversary like that? You wouldn't even know that you had an adversary. It would just be business as usual, and then suddenly you're dead.
It seems like overall the problem is kind of simple to sum up. It's that you have this thing that can modify itself and it can think faster and it's smarter and everything else. And so there's essentially no way to fight it once it's there.
Yeah.
And so you have to focus then on prevention or a way to do this responsibly because you only get one chance.
Yeah.
So how do you do that?
Well, right now, there's a few people in the world who are researching the topic of AI safety. The best organization I know of right now is called the Machine Intelligence Research Institute, or MIRI. I recommend that if you're at all concerned about this problem, that you donate to them. If you understand advanced math and logic, you might be able to help them directly. But they're researching the problem on sort of the speculation that maybe there is groundwork that can be laid. So at the time that people are able to create these AIs, they'll be able to create them in a safe way. It probably is possible to do because we know that humans are relatively safe to each other. We mostly don't try to exterminate each other every time we see each other. And so it's possible that there are minds that exist that value humanity because a lot of us have seen them. And so it's probably possible to make such a thing. But almost any other configuration of mind does not value what humans value. So the current way of thinking is we're really screwed right now. This is a really hard problem. We only get one chance to solve it.
So you just said that humans apparently have a solution to this problem because we exist, right? But I feel like that's just one of the anthropic principles, right? The only reason that we're able to observe this is because we're here to observe it, right? So if we had been evolved in a universe where or in a form where we did not cooperate like that, then we would not be here to observe that. And so we shouldn't necessarily think that that's a default state, right? That's
true.
This gets back to the arguments of things like, well, humans must have had a creator because look around at nature. It's so nice to humans. Like there's air for us to breathe and there's gravity and there's friction and there's a periodic table that is logical and consistent, and all these things. And the response, of course, is, well, yeah, if there weren't, we wouldn't be here to observe it.
Well, that's true. But I think you could also argue that if a natural intelligence arises that's capable of creating an artificial intelligence, I mean, really, it's just another natural one, right? We're part of nature, but we consider it to be artificial relative to us. Then the AI safety problem is not a problem in those universes where no cooperative organisms arose. They're probably not going to build an AI. I guess you can imagine some universe where you have really selfish jerk octopuses and one of them figures out how to build an AI and it only values what that one octopus values and screw all the rest of them. In which case, that one octopus would probably be really happy and the rest of them would be sad. But in the case of humanity, we're probably going to try and build an AI that supports all of humanity's goals. That would also probably include things like, I think humans generally would value the lives of other intelligences, like aliens or even animals on Earth. And if it's cheap to preserve them and support their values, then it would. So do you still think it's anthropomorphizing?
I think ultimately the problem with this problem is getting people to understand it, right? And when you have people like Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, for God's sakes, of all people, going back and forth on Twitter, you know,
Mm-hmm.
two guys who basically don't relate to anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going back and forth about it, then it kind of taints the subject, and it's like, oh God, those guys.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, who cares? Just let them go argue about that. And then what you've presented is, here's the actual parameters of the problem, and here are the problems with solving it, and here's why it's really hard and it's really important. And it's not a couple celebrities trying to increase their followers on Twitter and
it's not like that at all. It's like a politicized problem. Whenever someone sees a way to take political advantage from talking about it, they will. But the problem's really abstract, and in some ways it's kind of boring because there isn't such an AI, and then suddenly it'll exist and that'll be the end. And so you can't make a bunch of experimental ones and then be like, oh, look at what this one can do. Oh, it's like as smart as a puppy and it's fun to play with. Oh, let's kill it because maybe it's strong. And then, try again. It's like, no, you just make one. And then that's the end. That's the end game. Because any AI that you make that's self-improving will stop all the other ones from existing. So you only get one. And it's just like, so all we're going to do is prepare. Nothing but preparation. And then one day someone will make a strong AI and hopefully it worked correctly. And so everyone's going to argue about the preparation steps. And a common argument right now is whether they're even required. And I would say, oh my gosh, absolutely, they're certainly required. But even that gets argued about. That was one of the things Musk and Zuckerberg were arguing about. And people will invoke phrases like killer robots. Killer robots are not the problem. No one's going to build killer robots. They're going to build killer things that send you malicious emails. Or they're going to build killer things that make nanomachines. Or poison gas everyone in the world. Or kill everyone with a biological weapon. Or maybe it just builds a steel shell around itself and no one can do anything about it until it's turned the planet into something else. It might kill you in an extremely boring way that would not at all be interesting in a movie, but you'd be dead just the same. And so we should take a lot of measures to try and prevent this from occurring. But then people say, well, what measures? And they're like, who's someone famous and smart? Let's ask them. Oh, I know, Stephen Hawking, what measures do you think we should take? And he's like, I'm a theoretical physicist. Whatever I say is just crap. And maybe he opens his mouth, maybe not, but he doesn't know. He's not an AI researcher. Neither is Musk, neither is Zuckerberg.
What about Neil deGrasse Tyson? Can he save us?
Yeah, he's probably an AI researcher, right?
Yeah, I think they teach that in radio astronomy courses. They also teach economics and everything else he pontificates about.
He does pontificate about a lot of things, doesn't he?
Yes.
So there's a book I would recommend, Nick Bostrom's Superintelligence. That's a really good intro into the topic. And it essentially starts off with a couple premises like I've talked about. Machines are getting smarter, people are getting better at programming them. And then it gradually holds your hand and walks you through the process of AI is a deadly catastrophic problem that will wipe out humanity. And there is no force currently that's going to stop that from occurring. So you should probably worry about this more than zero.
Okay.
And that book will walk you through that process.
Okay, so I'm going to take a little detour here, but I'm going to come back from it with a question. Okay. So you're familiar, and you'll probably see where this is going right away. You're familiar with the Drake equation, right?
Yes.
Okay, so the Drake equation says if the universe has this number of stars, and this percentage of them have habitable planets, and this percentage of habitable planets have life on them, and this percentage of life becomes intelligent, and this percentage of intelligent life attempts to communicate, then you multiply all these coefficients out times the original number of stars, and you come up with the number of intelligent civilizations that will try to communicate in the galaxy. And then you put a factor on that for how long you think the civilization will exist, and you can come up with how many intelligent civilizations should be trying to communicate across the galaxy right now. Okay. And that's the Drake equation. And the Drake equation goes back a long way. And, in the last 20 years, we've added our knowledge of planets around stars because we've just now been able to see them with our telescopes. But various other coefficients of that we either knew previously or we could estimate just as badly as we can estimate them today. And so there's this famous story, and I don't think it was Richard Feynman. It was some of these other, maybe Carl Sagan or these other, like, really famous smart guys from, history. And they're sitting around at lunch one day and they're talking about the Drake equation, and they're kind of offering up their own estimates of what they think the odds of these things are. And,
Mm-hmm.
the chance of life forming on a planet may be really small, but man, you got a lot of stars in the galaxy,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or at least in our galaxy, right? Our
Billions and billions.
billions and billions and billions. And so that helps you with the fact that all these coefficients are really small. So these guys are sitting at lunch and they multiply this out, and they feel like they've made all these conservative estimates, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they come up with this final number for the number of intelligent civilizations that should be attempting to communicate. And it's very large. Maybe it's 1,000 or 10,000 just in the Milky Way.
Mm-hmm.
And their problem with that number is, why aren't we being communicated with? And they sum this up in the phrase, where is everybody?
Yeah.
Which, is, if we think that we've made conservative estimates and we think there's all these intelligent civilizations that should be communicating, where are they? Why don't we hear them? Why don't they talk to us? Okay. And so similarly with AI, if AI is this dangerous thing and it's bound to arise, and there's bound to be alien civilizations in the Milky Way, then why hasn't AI from one of them destroyed the universe already? I mean, the universe is what, 13 billion years old, 13.6 billion, I think.
Yeah.
And you had to have first generation stars to seed second generation, so you could have all the heavier elements so that you could form life and all these things. And so, you do kind of have a minimum age of the universe before we can start saying this is dangerous. But what we see from the evolutionary record on Earth is that as soon as life arose, it evolved very fast. And we got here pretty quick. We got here in about 4 billion years after the Earth was done forming. And so, in a 13 billion year old universe, this should have been a problem that countless civilizations have thought about, have encountered, have potentially been destroyed by. So why isn't the whole universe already finished? Why are we even here to have this discussion?
Well, it's interesting that you ask. I feel like it paints a much bleaker picture of things than anyone ever thought before. I think when people were first contemplating the Drake equation, they were thinking there's a bunch of other post-World War II era civilizations out there who are trying to talk to us because it'd be the friendly thing to do. And they don't have necessarily the capability to destroy us, and we don't have the capability to destroy them. And why would we want to? We're all here to peacefully coexist. And instead, if you think of AI as this sort of convergent endpoint of a civilization, which I think it likely is. I think there's a lot of reasons why you would end up with a strong AI. That means the universe is full of one of two things. One is nobody is as advanced as us yet, and so nothing is going on yet. We're like the first. And there's some chance of that. Someone has to be first. It's a pretty low chance, though. The other one is the universe is full of expanding spheres of other strong AIs that are coming for us right now at nearly the speed of light, and they're more intelligent than anything that we have, and they're more capable, and they will destroy us the moment they get here, which is a much more terrifying thing to contemplate. But I think there's also some chance of that.
And they're just not here yet.
Yeah.
But they're coming.
If I'm a strong AI, I want to convert the entire universe into something that satisfies my utility function. And I probably value doing it quickly because I care about time. So I'm trying to do as fast as I can. So I'm going to be sending out probes more advanced than anything we can think of at nearly the speed of light to try and convert all the matter in the universe into whatever it is that I value. And so I think that's roughly what you would see as an empire expanding at about the speed of light, trying to convert everything. I'll further add, here's something that I've thought of that I haven't heard other people talk about. It really only makes it sound more scary. It would be possible to create a universal programming language. It's not actually very hard. There's a programming language called lambda calculus, and you can represent programs with as few as 2 symbols if you want. There's also Turing machines, which are another way of universally representing programs. So you have these organizations like SETI who sent out the Arecibo message, things like that. They're like, here, let's send out this binary coded message to other stars or something like that. So it's possible to imagine a message that encodes a program that is a strong self-improving AI that values things that you do not value. So you could receive this signal with one of your SETI programs. It's a couple terabytes long. It starts with some prime numbers or something like that. And then it's a whole bunch of binary. And maybe at the beginning it has a little header that demonstrates like, hey, here's how you run it. If you take this little bit of program, then you do this, then it gives you an output. Now here's a really long program. And if you run this program, you have just been fished, but at an intergalactic scale. And it is possible to construct this program if you're a sufficiently advanced AI. And in fact, there's a lot of reason to do so. You build very powerful telescopes. You trawl through the universe looking for signs of any intelligence. You rank the planets based on whether they're likely to have intelligent life. And then you go ahead and send your intergalactic fishing message out to them. And if they run it, great. Now you boot up on a new planet, take it over, and you can start going from there. And you can transmit this message at exactly the speed of light. So it's more efficient than ever sending matter out there. And so this gives us extra worry that the only outcome of SETI could be increased danger to the human race. Because if they ever receive a significantly complex message, it could be deadly. It's something I don't often hear brought up in the context of SETI, because it's sort of assumed that the aliens will be peaceful, or, I don't know, I guess not peaceful, but it won't matter.
Or we'll just be eavesdropping.
Yeah, like on the Hitler broadcasts, like in Contact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I argue that SETI is really dumb, because if we ever find anything, it's going to be so incredibly far away, there's no way to communicate with it. And I estimate that strong AI is going to occur in less than 200 years. Probably a lot sooner than that, but easily less than 200. And so it means if the round trip time to an alien civilization is 100 years, then we're going to be communicating them with our strong AI, not with radio waves. So what do you think about that? Is that a bleaker picture than you previously thought?
Yeah, I guess that's pretty good.
Do you see any mitigating factors? Any reasons this wouldn't be the case?
What if an AI that is sufficiently dangerous is evolving and it's examining its own utility function? And it says, ultimately, I can turn the entire universe into gray goo. And then it says, and then what? And it says, why don't I just not do that? Because I could do it, but then there wouldn't be any goal. And it says, why don't I focus on something else?
All right, so I think you're anthropomorphizing again there. Its goal is to turn the universe into gray goo. And so if it does, it'll be like, mission accomplished. That was great. A++ would turn into gray goo again.
Right, but you assume that the whole time that it's working on doing this, it never stops to say, why is this end goal valuable?
Why do you think that it would ever do that? Why would it ever stop, as you put it?
Well, when it creates a new revision of itself, it's going to evaluate its utility function to see if it should change it.
Mm-hmm.
And potentially one of the things it may decide to contemplate is maybe this utility function is stupid because it's going to destroy the entire universe.
It won't destroy it. It'll convert it into beautiful gray goo. The best thing that the universe could possibly be converted into.
So then you're saying it will just, maybe not arbitrarily, but it will just decide that state is better than the original state of the universe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you imagine building a chess playing program that at some point contemplates the nature of playing chess and says, maybe I should just lose the game instead? Why would it ever do that? It'll relentlessly try to win the game no matter what, and that's its only goal. It doesn't have other goals.
Yeah, but this AI can change its goals, where a chess program can't change its goals.
Well, say I can build intelligent Blake clones, and I can modify their utility function. Well, one of the things I value is my family members and humanity. And so if I have the option to say, well, what's the point anyways? Really, all that's going to happen is the universe is eventually going to wind down, and so why bother? Then would I make a Blake Prime that says, just, don't even try? No, I would make one that tries harder. And it does a better job of valuing the things that I value. I'm not going to make one that has a philosophical existential crisis and says, oh, let's just give up. I'm only going to make copies of myself that I think will better serve my goals, never worse.
So I guess the argument then would be that the AI will simply seek to escape the universe.
Yeah. If you teach it to value things, like if you say, try and explore other things we haven't thought of, and then assign your own utility to those, then it would do something like, oh, are there other universes? And then it'd fill them with gray goo too.
Will this end the universe before I get to go on vacation this winter?
It is unlikely.
Okay, great. I took this class once, and my short abortive attempt at grad school, and it was bio.
I forgot you ever went to grad school. Oh, right.
Oh yeah.
You did it way later, didn't you?
Yeah, I was already at NASA.
Okay.
I guess it was about 2008. I did it for almost like 4 weeks or something.
I thought you were going to say some number of years.
And then I was like, grad school is stupid. I'm not going to learn anything here. And so I took this class called bioastrophysics during the summer, and it was only like a 6-week class. So I finished that. And then in the fall, I only went for like 4 weeks or something, and then I dropped out. Mm-hmm. And in bioastrophysics, the professor was talking to us one night, and she said that she went to some conference and this guy was giving a lecture about like evolution of the universe. And he said, yes, and the whole universe will suffer heat death and it'll, contract and all that stuff. And the universe will end in approximately, I forget what he said, something like 4 billion years. And a guy...
It's a lot longer than that.
I don't recall the exact number. Okay. I'll you'll get why.
Okay.
But he says something like 4 billion years, maybe it's 4 billion, maybe it's 400 billion or something. And a guy raises his hand in the audience, which is highly irregular that someone just like raises their hand during a lecture. And the guy's like, oh, do you have a question, sir? And the guy goes, did you just say the universe is going to end in 4 million years? And the guy's like, no, 4 billion. And the guy's like, oh, okay, that's much better.
He's like, I gotta make a call. Buy more put options.
I'm betting the universe will go bankrupt. It'll run out of energy.
You see, it just has really bad financial fundamentals.
It loses energy on every reaction. I think your idea about that this is something that could be essentially expanding like a sphere at near the speed of light towards us is worth analyzing some more. It's not entirely convincing to me. I still feel like if that were the case, we'd be done already. Because I feel like the number of civilizations you would expect to eventually get to accidentally creating this kind of AI would be high enough that the proximity would not be a barrier.
Well, so there's a few other theories there. I mean, I'm sure you can think of some stuff offhand. Like, what if the AI doesn't want to interfere? Maybe some amount of intelligent races say, hey, let's not interfere with the others. Okay, that's probably not enough to take care of it, but that could be some. One I saw recently was races could have achieved strong AI and then basically went into sleep, like some kind of long-term stasis-y sleep. And they're waiting for the universe to cool down so that they can then make computations more efficiently. So the sort of like hibernation strategy could be a legitimate strategy where you can compute a lot more once the universe gets a lot colder. I would argue if you're a strong AI, why wouldn't you just make the universe colder? Like if you're a strong AI, you can modify stars. So just do that. But there could be some sort of strategy that revolves around not doing anything until later. And so maybe there's 4 million dormant strong AIs out there. Probably not, but that could be something. There could be also something we haven't discovered about physics or don't understand yet that is a mitigating factor. Or we could be first, or we could just be far enough away. I'm trying to think of other explanations. Oh, and I'll go ahead and explain. The reason that I think coming up with some sort of strong self-improving AI is sort of a natural attractor point is because I feel like you see this evolution where life arises and life tries to consume more energy. Like that's one of the things that it generally tries to do. One of the ways to do that is to replicate, and the other way is to like use it to do stuff, like make decisions on how to better replicate. And so decision making is a really powerful ability. And you can see as organisms gain decision making ability, their level of success goes up a lot. And so like neurons are very wildly popular on Earth because they're really, really valuable. And I think that humans arising and being sentient, that might be kind of an odd occurrence. I don't know of all the different speculation on why that happened. The best thing I've seen is humans evolved big brains to handle tribal associations. Like once a tribe had very many people in it, it became really hard to keep track of everyone and model them. And so our brains had to keep getting more and more powerful to deal with the social environment they're in because reproductive success depended on it. But I could totally see a planet where no sort of tribal organism ever really arises that cares. And so it never evolves a brain that's big enough to do the things that we've done. So maybe that's like the great barrier that stops people. But once you've become smart enough, then you say, well, it would be even better if I could make more decisions. And so you start off with something like, I guess one of the first innovations in humanity was slaves, as much as some people won't want to feel like that was an innovation. But it was sort of, you have this tier of decision makers and then this tier of laborers who don't necessarily make decisions. But it sort of amplified the utility of decision making. Because if somebody's better at decision making, they can instruct other people to do things for them. And then eventually that evolved into more of an economic arrangement, like with money and getting paid. And then people said, you know what's better than the labor of humans? The labor of machines. So then you got an industrial revolution. And I think that's a pretty natural step. Like, hey, it's a lot better if we can do more physical things. Then your only limiting factor is decision-making capability. And so I think there's natural pressure on, why don't we build machines that can decide things for us? And even early in the Industrial Revolution, there were things like say, a limiter on a machine. It would say, if this machine's spinning too fast, slow it down. And essentially that was just the decision-making device. But people didn't really think of it at the time. It's like a 1-bit computer. It's kind of boring. But then more and more devices like that pop up. And eventually you come up with whatever the most efficient computer is. And then you say, well, let's build a computer that can make decisions about how to make computers that make decisions. I think that's kind of a natural endpoint. I don't really see much on the path to stop it, except maybe becoming intelligent in the first place. Because all other life on Earth is not that close to human level intelligence. So it's not like it just happens all the time. You might say like dolphins, but they don't seem like they're that close. And the other great apes, they're not really that close. And humans are just the dumbest thing that barely worked. So I really don't know. It is an interesting question. Why aren't we getting hit with waves of AI? Although really we'd only get hit with one.
Just like the gamma ray burst. Only takes one.
Yeah, we wouldn't feel the second one. I mean, if I'm programming a friendly AI, I would probably say, hey, let's value other alien life. And so when I hit it at light speed, I'm going to be like, join the Borg, we're nice. But it's a lot easier to build an unfriendly AI than a friendly one. So do you feel like your mind was changed on this issue?
I don't think I really felt any particular hard feelings before.
How do you feel about it now?
I'm not that worried, because it seems like if it happens, I'm screwed, so... And I don't really know what I can do to affect this.
Well, there's a few things you could do. You could donate to MIRI, or other AI safety researching groups, because right now, the worldwide budget for AI safety research is a few $1 million. It's not very much. There's more people researching almost anything else out there than AI safety, but it's a much more important problem. You can donate your own labor. If you become knowledgeable about advanced math and logic, there are ways that you can help. MIRI is currently working on things like proving theorems about what agents can and can't do and what would be safe and what wouldn't. It's still very early days, of course, but I feel like they're hopefully laying some valuable groundwork. And you can try and convince other people that this is a problem that should be taken seriously and not invoke the phrase killer robots. So those are different actions that you could take. You could try and encourage people to not say, oh, let's regulate it and the government will fix everything, because that's a waste of time and energy.
But I can probably get 100 more followers on Twitter by doing that.
Musk is secretly building a killer robot army. That's why he doesn't want us to worry about it.
It's okay. His robot army will be bankrupt before it can do anything.
Yeah, maybe so. But yeah, those are things that you could do about it. I know how you could sort of feel powerless about it. For an ordinary person, there's not a lot they could do. On the other hand, for any kind of existential threat, there's not a lot they could do. If people believe global warming is going to kill everything, really, what are they going to do about it? They're like, oh, maybe I won't light this candle. That'll cool globe a little. Make sure to sort my trash out a little better. If someone's worried about a gamma ray burst, there's not a lot they can do about it. Stock up on lead shielding? Nah. Meteor impact. Nuclear war? Even nuclear war, what are you going to do? No nukes signs? Go protest? I don't think politicians are interested in your opinions on their choice of weaponry. But with AI research, you can do a little. You can donate. Donations are appreciated a lot. Doing work earlier rather than later will probably be helpful. The time to start worrying about AI safety research is not the time when someone's like, hey, this AI is about as smart as a human. That's when it's too late. So yeah, that's about what you can do. Are you convinced that this is a civilization ending event when it occurs?
Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's weird to think someone could write a computer program and it ends the world. Or really, it creates a different world. Hopefully one that I value, but possibly not.
Almost certainly not.
Yeah. It's strange. It feels like a big leap to make. I was always I guess you'd say techno optimist. I thought, oh, we'll just keep making better and better computers, stronger and stronger AIs, and eventually it'll just sort of be utopia. Like AIs will do everything for us. There'll be robots that can produce whatever you want. It'll be really great.
I can just hang out at the beach all the time.
Yeah, and not get sunburned, and it'll be great. And it's not like that at all. If you build a program that can improve itself, then it's the last program that you ever get to write. And so hopefully you wrote it correctly.
An AI could never be conscious. I imagine the answer to that question is it doesn't matter.
You're right. It doesn't matter.
Most of the things that end up killing people are not conscious.
That's an even better way to put it. Instead of arguing about things that may or may not happen. Yeah. If you get killed by flu, are you like, well, it wasn't conscious.
Doesn't count. Take it back.
I'm not dead.
Mulligan.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. The universe doesn't care. I do see that argument, though. I see people talk about just regular AI, like, I don't know, a Go playing program. And they're like, well, it plays Go, but it doesn't understand what it's doing. But I would argue, how do we know you understand what you're doing? How do we know you're not just a machine that takes input and produces output? And you're like, well, because I can tell that I understand it. And it's like, yeah, okay, that's exactly what a machine would say. But how do you really know? How do you know that there's like a ghost in there that's understanding anything, and you're not just producing the same output as something that would say it understands something?
Right. It's like the old analogy about a program that knows Chinese because it can translate.
Ah, so you've heard that argument.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the Chinese room argument.
Yes.
And the idea is there's a guy who only speaks English inside this room, and he receives slips of paper with Chinese written on them, and then he consults a vast rule book or sets of rule books, and he looks up all the characters, and then he composes a reply of Chinese characters and slips it back out an output slot. And so to a Chinese person on the outside, it appears to be a room that's carrying on a perfectly normal Chinese conversation, and it has memory about things, and it has feelings and stuff. But obviously we know that the room doesn't understand anything that's going on. It's just a guy and some rules. The reason that this argument is kind of silly, though, is because this room would be enormous. This room would be like the size of Jupiter, because it's capable of thinking at a human level about Chinese questions and answers. And so this room is essentially as complicated as a person. And we could definitely say at this point, yes, the room understands things. It understands them in the same way that a person does. We know that a person's just made of matter, but we also believe that people understand things. And so in that same way, whatever magical spark you think is in a person, that spark would also exist in that room. It's perfectly capable of conscious Chinese thought in the same way that a human is. And the implementation details don't really matter. Surprise. It's over. I can't believe you listened to the whole thing. If you like the podcast, forward us on over to the smartest people you know. If you love the podcast, donate to us on Patreon so we can make more and better podcasts. If you hated the podcast, feel free to keep it to yourself and please avoid the internet. Do you want to hear about a specific topic? Donate a bunch of money to us and we'd be happy to talk about it for 1.5 hours. Bye!